And I think that's just so much fun. And then if you have a question, use the methods that are available, but move them, move them forward, move them to where you want them to be. So already in my PhD thesis, I used cadaver studies, I used some invasive studies as well, and I've continued with that with some of the studies we did at Karolinska Institute. And I just think it's use the knowledge that you have and the things that are at your disposal and form them to the methods that you want to answer the study questions that you're using. Be innovative. And it just makes it so much more exciting. It also teaches you academics in a good way, because if you're innovative and get new methods, you also have to be very good at reliability, validity studies, make sure that the methods that you're using are actually correct and do what they're supposed to do. We've been into this one a bit already, internationalization. I don't think you have to be a fantastic biomechanist to get very far. I think the important thing is working with people that you want to work with, go international, work with other institutions, other laboratories, other cultures. It just helps you so much, and it's invaluable, the help you can get from international networks. An example is my work, or I'm not sure if you can call it work even, with the International Society of Biomechanics. It's just been so productive, and the networking that you can get and the invitations you get and the people you can invite as well to do collaborations with, it just drives along my biomechanics by itself. So especially nowadays, I think it's really, really important to think international. A final one, which doesn't rhyme with the other ones, but integrity. This is something that I think it's getting more and more important as well in today's society, but also with some of the scandals, especially in Sweden. I'm not sure if you've heard about.
No.
There's been some big ethical scandals in Sweden. So of course research ethics are part of this question, but I think that's also quite standard, because research ethics, you always have to do an ethical application, you make some reflections about your study, and then you get it accepted and you do your study. But what I'd like to highlight here is also integrity in the data you use, for example. That the data that you show, you have to be able to stand for and know that it's correct. You can lead it all the way back to where your measurements were taken, what you've done to them, how you've processed them, and then also the conclusions you take from them. That's an integrity scale right there. But also finally, the final point on this is integrity between people. At your workplace, in your research group, your supervisor or your PhD student, it's all people, they're all trying to do their best, and by everyone helping each other do their best, you're going to be the most productive you can be. So I find this one really, really important, between people, that you respect the people you're working with and let them be themselves and do their work as good as they can and try and work together in that way.
Presenting it this way, I'm very, very sure you are a big inspiration for other people and upcoming researchers and students.
It's interesting. I think I use them more for myself, nearly, and trying to pinpoint the things that I think are important. And if I can hold myself to them, then I think I can develop myself as well. If it can be an inspiration to anybody, then that's fantastic. So
I'm very sure. Yes, very, very sure.
Thank you.
Thinking of your academic work, I would like to add another I word, maybe not in the philosophical way.
Idiot?
No, not idiot. Invasive.
About the same thing. No. Okay.
So when I think of Toni Arndt and I think of the things you did, I always think invasive. Invasive,
that's interesting. That's
invasive methods.
Sure. That's an image that I have.
But at least
yes, it is. It does fascinate me. It started at the start of my PhD, when I was just getting interested in Achilles tendons and the loading and biomechanics of Achilles tendons. And I had read a lot about people that calculated the loading or the forces in the Achilles tendon. And there's some fantastic work that's been done there, and there's some excellent algorithms and inverse dynamics for measuring it. But then I saw this one early article from Paavo Kormi, and he, instead of calculating it, he just measured directly on the tendon. So he built a buccal transducer, operated into or around the tendon, and when you had a load on the tendon, the buccal transducer measured it, and so he had the actual force in an anatomical structure. And I just thought, that's so simple. People want to know what's happening in the Achilles tendon, then go to the Achilles tendon. And so I never used the buccal transducer. That was quite invasive. We've tried to be as little invasive as possible to be able to answer the questions we can, but some studies that we did on the Achilles tendon used an optic fiber method, where a very thin optic fiber is inserted through the Achilles tendon and can, with some calibration, also measure the force. We did a few publications on that. Some problems, some limitations with the method, and it's not very widely used anymore. We have, right now anyway, stopped with the method. But it was fascinating to try it, and we got some good results. So I just thought that was fantastic fun. And then some work that we've done more recently at the Karolinska Institute is the kinematics of the intrinsic segments of the foot. You can measure 3D kinematics with markers on the skin, which a lot of people do, and which works very well on a lot of the segments in the body. But we all know that there's skin movement artifacts, so if you put a marker on the skin, it's going to move relative to the bone underneath that you're trying to measure. And on the foot, it's even more complicated because there's so many bones. There's 27 of the bones that are very, very close together. And having these markers that are maybe a centimeter big on the foot, you don't really know which bone they're representing. And in a dynamic movement, the mark might even move over more than one bone. So what we thought is, if we want to measure the motion of the segments in the foot, then measure the motion of the segments of the foot, not the skin. So I wasn't first with this. There had already been some previous work at Karolinska Institute where Arne Lundberg had used bone pins that you drill into the bone and that have a marker array with 3 markers on it attached to them. So in the same way that you use motion capture for other kinematics, you could now look at these bone pins that were directly connected to the bones. And this has been done on the ankle joint and also on the knee joint, if I remember correctly. But what we wanted to do was go into the rest of the foot. And so we, at the most, I think, had 10 of these inserted at the same time in 10 different bones. And then could walk, do slow running, and some applied studies as well. We've looked at some inserts and different shoe wear and to see what effect it has on the kinematics in the foot. And it's been really exciting to be part of that journey, to be part of those studies. My most cited articles are definitely within that field. Just basic research, just some knowledge that people need to know what's happening there. So I'm very proud of that work.
For sure.
I think it's maybe obsolete nearly. It might be changing due to imaging techniques that are developing extremely fast now and will soon be able to do that as well without having to be invasive. And that's fantastic. I mean, I'm not trying to defend a method that's invasive, but at the time it was just a fantastic thing to do to get the information that a lot of people wanted.
Are you going to continue your invasive methods, invasive studies?
It's never been an aim to work invasively. It's just been when we've looked at limitations of the methods available, we realized that by being invasive, we would be able to remove those limitations. So it's definitely not a goal to have invasive methods. No way. I don't think that's the right way to think. And also, I was at Karolinska Institute for all those years, where the possibilities and the competence of the doctors that are there, the sterility, the operation rooms, we had everything right there. Now I'm at a sport university, and it's not the same facilities or possibilities here. So it's not really that much of a question anymore. One thing that the Swedish School of Sport and Health Sciences does have a history with is Intramuscular Emg, which is slightly invasive. It's you put the EMG electrodes, which are fine wires, into the muscles that you're trying to measure, rather than having them on the skin. And so obviously it's invasive, but it's just a needle prick basically that you insert the wire with, and then you can pull it out again later. So it's not cutting skin or anything. But it is something that we've done here and have a strong tradition in, and there's still some ongoing studies with intramuscular Emg here as well, which is, once again, the limitations that we identified with skin electrodes are that you have something in between the electrode and the muscle. You can have crosstalk with other muscles, so you might be measuring the wrong muscle. And with intramuscular EMG, you get rid of these limitations. So we just think it's a more advanced method for better data. There's other limitations. It's a very, very limited area of muscle that you're measuring. But at least you are getting very clean data from that muscle that you're looking at. So
I had fine wire EMG on my tibialis posterior, and I find it invasive enough for me. So
okay.
it was quite an experience.
Yeah. No, we've got 2 studies at the moment. One looking at flexor hallucis longus and its activity, and it's a difficult muscle to have surface EMG on. And one maybe more complex study looking at the interaction of the hamstrings in different exercises.
Since you moved to that lab here, what is your main research focus here? Is it sports biomechanics? And so you said you were moving away from the more medical side of it.
Yeah, which is natural, obviously, coming here. But I've still kept the focus on the musculoskeletal. I really enjoy basic research. I realize that sometimes, and that's getting more and more pressure at the moment, that you have to be able to show what value is it to companies or society. And sometimes that's a difficult question to answer when it's basic research. It's inquisitiveness. I want to find out what's happening. And I can't always answer what use is this in a broader perspective. So yeah, but musculoskeletal basic research definitely still. We're still continuing with the Achilles tendon as well. Like I mentioned in my PhD, I was really looking at the loading or deformation in the tendon, and what I pretty much showed in my PhD thesis was that there's an asymmetrical deformation in the Achilles tendon. So the whole tendon doesn't behave in the same way when you load it or when you're doing an activity. And because my methods were both cadaver and a little bit invasive, they haven't really been followed up until recently, when ultrasound methods, in particular a method called speckled tracking, have been developed. And they've allowed non-invasive measurements of the Achilles tendon, and you can actually see this non-uniform deformation in the tendon. And for me, this was just so amazing about 5 years ago when some researchers started showing this, that it's confirming what I showed 20 years ago in my PhD. And what a confirmation for research that you've done. That just felt so nice. And now there's quite a few research groups doing it. We've just had a PhD student at Karolinska Institute finishing her PhD on speckled tracking. And so we're continuing on looking at this asymmetrical deformation in, for example, running in different shoes or wearing different ankle foot orthoses. A little bit more applied, but still definitely basic research, musculoskeletal on the Achilles tendon.
So Achilles tendon is an ongoing topic. I like that. And when I studied things on Achilles tendon, I was reading that article in Der Preparator, that you did that in Cologne in the Institute of Anatomy with Professor Köpke during your time with Peter Brüggemann. Did this article on Achilles tendon anatomy. Really, it's cool that you're still following up with that.
And I'm very proud of that as well. Continue that line. It's actually my only German article, so I'm quite proud of that as well.
There is you gave us some keywords on studies you are doing here at the moment, and I was you were pushing boundaries. There was this study on figure skating, and you had ice in the lab here, didn't you?
Well, artificial ice.
Artificial ice.
So it's plastic that has very low friction.
Okay. So it wasn't like real ice.
No, it wasn't. It's a mat that's about a centimeter. Yeah, about a centimeter thick. That's artificial ice that they practice on as well.
Okay.
But we had it spread over the floor here, and the figure skaters jumped off a box, did a pirouette, and landed on the ice on the force platform to measure the landing biomechanics, the impact forces mainly.
With motion capture again.
Motion capture and
we
had
small
pressure
video.
distribution in the.
What other studies have you got here at the moment?
Yeah.